The hum of conversation fills the air as passengers shuffle down the narrow aisle of Flight 237, stowing their bags, adjusting their seats, and settling in for the 3-hour journey from Dallas to Philadelphia. The low murmur of voices blends with the occasional click of seatbelt buckles as the plane begins to fill up, slowly but steadily. Daniel Brisco doesn't rush. He moves with the ease of someone who's done this more times than he can count. Late 30s, sharp suit, quiet confidence. His movements are deliberate, measured. There's a rhythm to the way he moves through the airport, steps timed with the swaying of the crowd, each action purposeful. He blends in, yet there's something about him that makes people take a second look. It's not because of who he is, not exactly, but more because of what people assume about him. When he reaches seat 3A, he places his leather carry-on in the overhead bin, adjusts his seatbelt, and exhales a rare moment of stillness. No fieldwork, no investigations, no bureaucratic headaches. Just a few hours of uninterrupted silence before his next assignment, or so he thinks. The sudden shift in the air catches his attention. He barely glances up as a woman in a cream-colored sweater and pearl earrings slides into seat 3B, placing her designer handbag beside her like it's some kind of precious artifact. She's in her early 50s, her blonde bob meticulously styled, her perfume just strong enough to announce itself, but not overwhelm. She sets down her bag, adjusting her sweater sleeve before stealing a look at Daniel. Not the casual glance of a fellow traveler, no, this is different. It's evaluative, calculating, suspicious. Her fingers tighten around the purse strap as she clears her throat, leaning ever so slightly away from him. "You must be in the wrong seat," she says, her voice edged with something that isn't just curiosity. There's something more, something cutting. Daniel turns his head slowly, meeting her eyes with an expression that's unreadable calm but not passive, aware but not reactive. "I don't think so," he replies, pulling out his boarding pass. "3A," he says just to be sure. She hesitates, blinking rapidly as if recalibrating her thoughts before offering a tight smile. "Oh, I see." But the way she shifts away from him, pressing herself against the armrest as though she's trying to create more space, says everything she doesn't. Daniel doesn't react. He's seen this before 100 times, in 100 different ways. He adjusts his watch, leans back in his seat, and closes his eyes. The plane hasn't even left the gate yet, and he already knows it's going to be a long flight. But Margaret Whitman isn't done yet. The plane door seals shut with a mechanical hiss. Flight attendants weave through the aisle, securing overhead bins, checking seatbelts. The captain's voice crackles through the speaker, announcing a slight delay before takeoff. Daniel keeps his eyes closed, arms relaxed on the armrest. He's not asleep, just resting, tuning out the world like he's mastered the skill over the years. Next to him, Margaret shifts. She crosses and uncrosses her legs, clears her throat, tugs at her sleeve, and shifts again. The seconds drag on. A few minutes pass before she exhales sharply and turns her head toward Daniel, her voice deliberately polite, but carrying the forced cheerfulness of someone barely masking discomfort. "So, are you traveling for business?" she asks, her eyes scanning him like she's trying to deduce something from his appearance. Daniel opens one eye, glancing at her. He recognizes the type, the ones who ask questions, not because they care about the answer, but because they're trying to make something fit in their heads. "Yes," he says simply, not offering more. She nods too quickly, pursing her lips. "Oh, what do you do?" There it is, the fishing. Daniel could give her the full answer, tell her about his years in law enforcement, his current role in federal investigations, but something tells him it won't matter. She doesn't really want the truth. She wants to label him, categorize him in a way that's comfortable for her, and for that he doesn't need to feed her curiosity. He considers shutting it down with something vague, consulting, government work, something that won't invite more conversation. But before he can decide, Margaret shifts tactics. "You know," she says with a little forced laugh, "I almost missed this flight. Had to switch last minute. I usually fly private, but with all the issues at security these days, I figured I'd just take first class and avoid the headache, you know? Daniel doesn't answer. He knows exactly where this is going. Margaret adjusts her sweater sleeve like she's trying to look more at ease, but it's all an act. I mean, she continues, airport security is just not what it used to be. They're letting all sorts of people through these days. There it is, the thinly veiled assumption. Daniel finally turns to face her, slow and steady, his eyes fixed on hers. He's seen this kind of thing 1,000 times before, the discomfort, the judgment, the bias wrapped up in an innocent-seeming comment. Margaret offers him a quick, tight-lipped smile, then glances down at his hands as if searching for something that could make him less trustworthy in her eyes. She leans in slightly, lowering her voice, though the pitch is no less sharp. I just think, she whispers, almost conspiratorially, with everything happening in the world, people should be more aware of their surroundings. You never know who's sitting next to you. She says it lightly, like she's making small talk, but Daniel hears the undertone of suspicion. He lets the silence sit, waiting to see if she'll squirm. She does. Margaret presses on as if needing to justify herself. I mean, you must feel the same way, right? Especially if you travel a lot for work. Daniel exhales quietly, measuring his words. This isn't new to him. I try not to assume things about people, he says, his voice even, calm. Margaret blinks, taken aback. Oh, I wasn't assuming anything, she forces a laugh. But the tension between them is thick now. Margaret is getting uncomfortable with her own discomfort. She shifts again, looks around the cabin, glances at the flight attendant standing a few rows up, and her fingers twitch toward the call button. Daniel can already see where this is headed. He doesn't stop her. Because Margaret Whitman is about to embarrass herself in front of an entire plane. Her fingers hover over the call button for a long moment, hesitation written on her face. It's like she's trying to decide whether she's being reasonable or paranoid. But when she glances at Daniel again, his broad shoulders, his composed expression, the way he isn't scrambling to prove anything, her mind is made up. She presses the button. A soft chime rings through the cabin. A few passengers glance up, intrigued. The flight attendant, a young woman with dark brown hair pulled into a neat bun, makes her way over, offering a polite but curious smile. Everything all right, ma'am? She asks. Margaret shifts in her seat, smoothing her sweater like she's trying to compose herself. Two just have a little concern, she says, her voice now thick with tension. The flight attendant's brows lift slightly, a signal that she's trying to figure out exactly what kind of concern they're dealing with. A concern? The flight attendant asks, her voice polite but with a hint of skepticism. Margaret glances at Daniel, almost as if she doesn't want to say it in front of him. Could I speak with you privately? The flight attendant hesitates for just a second but then nods, leaning in slightly. Is there an emergency? Margaret lowers her voice, but not enough Daniel can hear every word. I don't feel comfortable, she whispers, then tilts her head toward Daniel. I don't know if he's supposed to be here. Silence. The flight attendant's polite smile falters for just a moment. She straightens up, clearly confused. Ma'am, could you clarify what you mean by that? Margaret stiffens, clearly not expecting resistance. I just mean it's odd, don't you think? I mean, look at him. Daniel closes his eyes for a brief second, inhaling slowly, trying to keep his calm. This is a familiar feeling, the cold weight of judgment, of being singled out for no reason other than someone's assumptions. The passengers in row 4 are definitely listening now. A middle-aged man in a business suit peeks over his newspaper. A woman in seat 2C subtly lowers her phone, clearly recording without even trying to hide it. The flight attendant's voice tightens. Sir is in his assigned seat, ma'am, she says, her tone professional. First-class passengers boarded before economy, so if there was an issue, it would have been flagged already. Margaret shakes her head, her lips curling into something that might have been a smile if she weren't so defensive. I just think, she mutters. I don't know, could you maybe check his boarding pass just to be sure? Daniel finally speaks, his voice calm, but there's an unmistakable weight behind it. "You're asking them to check my ticket," he says, his voice even but firm, "but not anyone else's?" Margaret's face flushes, but she stumbles for words. "Two, that's not what I—" A man in row 5 lets out a quiet chuckle. "Oh, lady, you really want to do this right now?" Margaret whips around, her eyes darting to the small crowd now tuned into her performance. She hadn't expected an audience. The flight attendant, now visibly annoyed, turns to Daniel. "Sir," she says, clearly embarrassed on his behalf, "I apologize for this." "You're obviously fine." Margaret doesn't like that. She doubles down. "I don't see why you're getting defensive. I just think it's better to be safe than sorry. You hear stories all the time about—" Daniel exhales sharply, cutting her off. He could argue, could call her out for exactly what she's doing, but he doesn't. Instead, he reaches into his jacket pocket and flips open his FBI badge. The entire row goes silent. Margaret stares, her mouth opening and closing in disbelief. Every ounce of confidence drains from her face. The flight attendant stiffens, blinking at the ID before looking back at Margaret. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" she asks, her voice stiff but now laced with professionalism. Daniel tilts his head slightly. "Do you feel safer now?" Margaret freezes. Her face has gone pale. The man in row 5 whistles low under his breath. The woman in 2C is definitely recording now, her phone aimed at Margaret, capturing every moment of the humiliation. The flight attendant clears her throat and straightens. "Well, that certainly clears up any concerns." Margaret doesn't say a word. She just stares at the badge, then at Daniel, then at the badge again. Then, without another sound, she slowly turns toward the window, pressing herself against it like she's hoping to disappear. The flight attendant nods at Daniel respectfully. "Let me know if you need anything, Agent Brisco." Daniel doesn't react, doesn't gloat, doesn't need to. He just closes the badge, tucks it back into his pocket, and leans back in his seat like nothing even happened. Margaret, on the other hand, doesn't move. Her entire body is rigid, like she's bracing for some kind of impact. But the only thing hitting her now is the weight of her own embarrassment. The passengers around her are watching, some are smirking, some are shaking their heads in disbelief. And the woman in seat 2C, yeah, she's not even pretending anymore. Her phone is fully angled toward Margaret now. The flight attendant returns, carrying a tray with a glass of water. She doesn't stop at Margaret's seat. Instead, she sets it down gently on Daniel's tray table. "Compliments of the cabin crew, sir." Daniel doesn't even blink. He just slides off his headphones, gives a small nod, and takes the glass. Margaret, meanwhile, is absolutely fuming, trying to grasp at control. "Well, this is ridiculous," she mutters, but no one responds. She glances around, eyes darting between the other passengers, as though looking for someone to back her up. No one does. The woman in 2C tilts her head, watching Margaret like she's observing a failed experiment. The man in row 5 just shakes his head again. "Lady, just stop." Margaret turns back to Daniel, trying to regain control of the situation. "I wasn't accusing you of anything," she says, voice clipped. "I was just doing what any cautious person would do." Daniel slowly lifts his glass of water, takes a sip, but doesn't respond. Margaret opens her mouth again, but nothing comes out. She closes it again, her face flushed with frustration and shame. The weight of the moment finally settles in. Margaret had tried to humiliate him to make him feel less than. Now the entire plane had watched her become the fool. Daniel doesn't say another word, doesn't need to. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out his noise-canceling headphones, and slides them on, like this conversation never even happened. Margaret. She won't be recovering from this anytime soon. The plane begins to taxi, the engines rumbling beneath their seats. Margaret remains frozen, her entire body radiating the discomfort of someone who has just realized that the world is watching. When the plane finally touches down in Philadelphia, people are already pulling out their phones. Notifications pop up, Murmurs fill the cabin, and the woman in 2C, yeah, she's smirking now, probably drafting the perfect caption for the video she's about to upload. Margaret grips her purse tightly, her eyes darting around, hoping to sink into the seat, to disappear. She moves quickly, trying to grab her bag before anyone can see. But Daniel doesn't rush. He unbuckles his seatbelt at his own pace, standing up smoothly, collected, untouched, unbothered. Margaret steals one last glance at him. Maybe she's looking for a way to fix this, an opening to save face. But Daniel doesn't give her one. Instead, as he grabs his bag, he turns to her just for a second, and all he says is one simple sentence. Do better. Nothing more. Nothing less. Then, without another glance, he steps into the aisle and walks away. Margaret stays frozen in her seat, grappling with a reality she never saw coming. Because this wasn't just about one bad moment. This was about who she had been her whole life. And now the whole world was about to see it too. Prejudice isn't just about hate. Sometimes it's about fear, ignorance, and unchecked assumptions. Margaret thought she was protecting herself. She thought she was looking out for safety. But real safety doesn't come from profiling innocent people. It comes from education, awareness, and accountability. For Margaret Whitman, that lesson just hit at 35,000 feet. If you took something from this story, share it. Challenge your own biases. Hold others accountable. Because the next time someone like Margaret makes a mistake like this, the whole world just might be watching.